Justice Samuel Alito tried to publicly embarrass Jasmine Crockett with a cold, calculated legal jab. But instead of snapping back, she paused, locked eyes with him, pulled the record into the spotlight, and delivered a calm, surgical response that stripped his authority in front of the cameras and flipped the entire hearing on its head. The courtroom was already tense before anyone even spoke. This wasn't a casual panel or a feel-good political talk show. It was a nationally broadcast congressional hearing in Washington, D.C., set up to examine judicial power, ethics standards, and the limits of constitutional authority. The press didn't show up for polite speeches. They showed up because they could smell a clash. The lens found Justice Samuel Alito in a tight shot. He didn't look angry. He looked certain, like he'd already decided how this was going to go. Then he did something that sounded polite on paper but hit like a slap in real time. He leaned back like he had all day, took his time, and aimed straight at Jasmine Crockett as if he was testing whether she belonged in the room at all. "Counselor," he said, calm as ever, "do you actually understand what the Constitution requires here?" The words were dressed up like doctrine, but the cut was personal. For a beat, nobody moved. Reporters froze with their fingers on laptops. Staffers stopped whispering. Even the people who came in expecting drama didn't expect that. But Crockett didn't shrink. She didn't rush to defend herself, didn't stumble over words, didn't do the thing people do when they feel cornered. Talk too fast, laugh nervously, over-explain. She just held still. Eyes locked forward with a calm face. Crockett finally leaned toward her microphone. The room went quiet enough that you could hear chairs shift and papers rustle. She opened with a calm, controlled tone, starting to lay out her position, choosing her words carefully, building the frame she had prepared. "The core issue here," she began, "is whether judicial authority is being exercised within constitutional limits." Alito didn't even let her finish her opening thought before cutting in. "That's not law," he snapped, voice still calm but sharpened like a blade. "That's political theater dressed up as constitutional language." He leaned forward, eyes locked on her, and pressed harder. "Define it. Right now, one sentence. What exactly is the constitutional issue here?" The way he said it wasn't neutral. It was a trap. Too simple and she'd sound shallow. Too detailed and he'd accuse her of dodging. He repeated the demand, slower this time, almost savoring it. "Yes or no, Congresswoman? Are you claiming this violates the Constitution, or are you just giving speeches for the cameras?" A low murmur rippled through the room because everyone understood what he was doing. He wasn't debating her ideas. He was trying to make her look small on live television. Alito sat back slightly, lips pressed together, wearing that expression that said he thought he'd cornered her. It was the look of someone expecting a stumble, waiting for the awkward pause, the rambling answer, the nervous laugh. Cameras zoomed tighter, hungry for the moment she might crack. But Crockett didn't crack. She lifted her head slowly and met his stare without blinking. "No, Justice Alito," she said, voice steady but cutting. "What you just did is theater. What I'm doing is law." That line alone made a few people shift in their seats. She didn't raise her voice, but every word landed harder than the last. "The issue is accountability. The standard is equal application of constitutional limits, and the text is clear. Power does not exist without responsibility." She paused just long enough to let the words sink in, then kept going. "You want a yes or no answer because simple answers are easier to dismiss. But the Constitution isn't simple when it's inconvenient for people in power." Her tone sharpened. "And pretending complexity is weakness is exactly how abuses get buried." Alito opened his mouth like he was about to interrupt again, but Crockett didn't give him space. "Let's be honest," she continued, eyes still locked on him. "You didn't ask that question to understand the law. You asked it to question my right to speak, and I'm not here to beg for permission." A quiet gasp slipped out from somewhere behind the cameras. She didn't brag about her resume. She didn't list credentials. She went straight for the pressure point. "If this conversation makes you uncomfortable, it's not because I'm being vague. It's because I'm being precise." For the first time since the exchange started, Alito didn't look bored. He looked measured, cautious, like he realized this wasn't going to be a quick dismissal anymore. Alito didn't just interrupt once. He made it a pattern, like it was part of the plan. Every time Crockett tried to build a full sentence, he sliced it in half and fixed a word like he was grading her in public. "No, don't say accountability," he snapped, waving his hand slightly. "That's a political term. Use a legal one." She tried again, calmer, tightening her phrasing, and he jumped right back in. "Wrong framing," he said. "You're smuggling conclusions into your question." The way he did it was meant to make her sound sloppy, like she was improvising, like she didn't belong in a room where every word gets weaponized. And the more he cut her off, the more he tried to bait a reaction. Because if she got emotional, even for 1 second, he could paint her as unprofessional and move on like he'd proven his point. Alito kept his tone measured, almost bored, which made it worse. He wasn't yelling. He was controlling. He wanted the audience to feel like she was failing to keep up, even though he was the one breaking the flow. Crockett didn't give him the blow-up he was fishing for. The next time he cut her off mid-sentence, she didn't rush to talk over him. She stopped. Completely. She let the interruption sit there in the open where everyone could see it. Then she nodded once, slow, polite, and repeated his words back to him like she was reading them into a transcript. "So, just to be clear," she said evenly, "you're telling me I can't use the term accountability in a hearing about accountability." That landed hard because it wasn't an insult. It was a mirror. And it made his interruption look less like guidance and more like bullying. He tried to correct her again, and she repeated him again, still calm, still respectful. But now every interruption was being turned into evidence of his attitude. For a moment, Alito hesitated, just a fraction, like he realized the rhythm was starting to work against him. Crockett used that opening to shift the fight onto safer ground he couldn't talk his way out of. She didn't argue about tone. She didn't argue about labels. She pivoted to proof. Her hand moved to the binder in front of her, tabs visible, pages already marked. "Justice Alito," she said, voice steady. "Before we debate theory, let's look at the record." She didn't slam anything down. She didn't perform. She just slid a section forward like a litigator setting an exhibit on the table. And right there, the air changed, because the record meant something in that room. It meant dates. It meant documents. It meant a paper trail that doesn't care how powerful you are. Crockett kept her tone calm, almost matter-of-fact, like she was done playing his word game. "If we're going to talk about constitutional limits," she said, "we start with what's documented. What's in the file, what's verifiable." She paused and looked up at him. "Then we can talk about your definitions." It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. Then Crockett didn't rush the moment. She reached forward slowly and pulled a thick packet from her binder, the kind that instantly changes the mood of a room. Colored tabs stuck out along the edge, each one clearly labeled: ethics, disclosures, timeline, correspondence. She slid it across the desk, just enough for the cameras to catch it. "I'm not here to declare verdicts," she said calmly. "I'm here to put what's already public, what's already documented, into the record for review." That line mattered. She wasn't accusing. She was framing this as process, not politics. The packet didn't look dramatic. It looked organized, heavy, real. And in a room built on paper trails and official records, that visual hit harder than any speech. Alito reacted fast, but it was the wrong move. He waved his hand slightly and scoffed. "This is political theater," he said flatly. "A stack of papers doesn't turn speculation into law." He tried to sound dismissive, above it, like the material wasn't worth his time. But the cameras betrayed him. As he spoke, his eyes dropped for half a second toward the tabs. Not long, not obvious, just enough. Long enough for producers to zoom in. Long enough for viewers to notice he had read the labels. And that tiny glance changed everything, because it told the audience he wasn't as uninterested as he pretended to be. Crockett caught it too. She didn't smile. She didn't comment on it. She just kept her tone steady and pushed the point. "These aren't rumors," she said. "They're publicly reported items, documented timelines, and correspondence already available to the public. I'm asking that we acknowledge them as part of this discussion." That's when the chair signaled to the clerk. The clerk leaned into the microphone, voice quiet but clear. "The materials have been submitted and entered into the hearing record." One sentence, no drama, no commentary, but it landed like a hammer. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Reporters started typing again, faster this time. Staffers straightened up in their seats. This wasn't about vibes anymore. It wasn't about who sounded smarter. It was about what was officially filed. Crockett didn't rush into the documents. She used them as a setup. She looked back at Alito and spoke slowly, deliberately, like she wanted every camera to catch the shift in tone. "You questioned whether I understand the foundations of constitutional law," she said. "So let's start there. Foundations don't begin with personalities. They begin with standards." She opened the top page and read just enough to make the point clear without drowning the room in legal jargon. Impartiality, transparency, disclosure, and the appearance of fairness. Then she looked up again. "Those aren't political ideas. Those are the basic guardrails that keep the system from collapsing." The room felt tighter again, but this time it wasn't from intimidation. It was from pressure, because she wasn't attacking him directly. She was building a framework and inviting him to step inside it. Alito saw where this was going and tried to shut it down fast. He leaned forward and cut in sharply. "Are you accusing me of misconduct, Congresswoman?" His tone hardened. Yes or no? It was a classic corner move. If she said yes, he could accuse her of defamation. If she said no, he could claim she had no point at all. He repeated it, slower, louder this time, making sure everyone heard the challenge. "Let's be clear. Are you alleging wrongdoing?" The room went dead quiet again. Reporters froze. Staffers stopped whispering. This was the moment designed to force her into a mistake. Crockett didn't blink. She shook her head once, calm but firm. "No," she said. "I'm not here to accuse you of anything." Alito's lips tightened like he thought he'd just won. But she didn't stop. "I'm here to ask whether the standard applies equally." That's when the energy snapped. "Because if the rules only matter for people without power," she continued, "then they're not standards. They're decorations." A few people in the room shifted uncomfortably. She leaned in slightly, voice still controlled but sharper now. "You asked me if I understand constitutional foundations. I do. And one of those foundations is that no office, no robe, and no title gets to operate above the same expectations everyone else is held to." Alito tried to interrupt again, but she kept going, not raising her voice, just tightening the logic. "This isn't personal," she said. "It's structural. Either we believe in equal application of standards, or we admit that authority comes with special exemptions." She paused and let that hang in the air. "So I'm not accusing you. I'm challenging the system that protects silence instead of accountability." That hit harder than any insult could have, because it didn't attack his character. It attacked the shield around him. Alito didn't immediately fire back. He adjusted in his chair, eyes narrowing, like recalculating. The room was already tight, but Crockett didn't let the pressure rush her. She straightened her papers once, looked directly at Alito, and spoke with a calm that felt heavier than shouting. "You mocked my understanding of the law," she said evenly. "So let me be clear about yours." A few heads lifted. She continued, voice steady but cutting. "A robe isn't a shield. It doesn't protect anyone from accountability." That line alone landed hard, but she didn't stop. Authority isn't immunity, and doctrine without accountability doesn't become wisdom. It becomes arrogance. You could feel the words settle into the room like weight being added to a scale. No insults, no theatrics, Just direct, uncomfortable truth aimed straight at the center of his power. Alito shifted slightly, lips tightening, preparing to jump in again, but Crockett didn't give him the opening. She leaned forward just enough to signal she wasn't finished. "You questioned whether I belong in this conversation," she said. "But the real question is whether this institution is willing to answer to the same standards it enforces on everyone else." Her tone sharpened. "Because when the people watching this see mockery instead of answers, they don't see strength. They see avoidance." The room was quiet now in a different way. Not awkward, focused, like everyone understood something important was happening and didn't want to miss a word. Then she delivered it. No build-up, no extra explanation. Just one clean line, slow and deliberate. "If my legal skills bother you," she said, locking eyes with him, "it's because they require an answer. On the record." That sentence hit the room like a switch being flipped. You could almost hear people inhale at the same time. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was built for replay, built to be clipped, built to live beyond this room. And everyone knew it. Alito didn't respond right away. Not because he was stunned in some dramatic way, but because any interruption now would look defensive. He sat there, hands still, eyes fixed forward, measuring the moment. The pause stretched longer than normal, just enough to feel uncomfortable. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters stopped typing again. Even the low background noise of the room faded. Alito finally moved, clearing his throat and straightening in his chair like someone trying to pull the conversation back onto familiar ground. "That line of argument isn't relevant to constitutional interpretation," he said, voice measured, almost dismissive. "We're here to discuss jurisprudence, not public perception." He leaned into the word jurisprudence like it was armor, repeating it again, slower, heavier, as if saying it enough times could lift him back above the moment. "Courts don't operate on feelings," he added. "They operate on doctrine." The tone was cool, controlled, carefully detached. He was trying to rise above the exchange, to make it seem like Crockett had dragged the conversation somewhere beneath the dignity of the bench. And for a split second, it looked like he might succeed. But Crockett didn't let him float away. She leaned forward again, not aggressively, but deliberately, like someone tightening the final bolt on a machine. "With respect," she said calmly, "courts don't operate in a vacuum." Her voice stayed even, but the logic was sharp. Public confidence is the foundation of legitimacy. Legitimacy depends on perceived impartiality, and impartiality depends on standards being applied consistently. She paused after each step, letting the chain form clearly in the air. "Break any one of those links," she continued, "and institutional stability starts to crack." That's when the room shifted again. Because she wasn't arguing vibes. She was building a system, one piece leading to the next, simple enough for anyone watching to follow, strong enough that it was hard to dismiss without sounding evasive. Alito tried to interrupt, lifting one hand slightly, but Crockett held the floor with quiet authority. "You can call this abstract if you want," she said, eyes steady. "But when people stop trusting the court, rulings stop carrying moral weight. When rulings lose moral weight, compliance becomes conditional, and when compliance becomes conditional, the institution weakens." The words weren't dramatic. They were dangerous in a different way, because they made sense. A few reporters nodded without even realizing it. A staffer in the back slowly stopped scribbling and just stared. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She just connected the dots and forced everyone in the room to see the full picture. That's when the chair turned to the side and addressed a senior counsel seated nearby. "Can you confirm whether the standards being referenced are commonly used in ethics frameworks?" The counsel adjusted their microphone and answered without hesitation. "Yes, the language regarding impartiality, disclosure, and appearance of fairness is standard across multiple judicial ethics guidelines." No commentary, no drama, just confirmation. But that single sentence landed harder than a speech. Because now it wasn't just Crockett saying it. It was the framework itself backing her up. Alito's jaw tightened. He looked down briefly, then back up, recalculating again. The move he tried, to float above the argument with doctrine, had collapsed under something heavier: structure, logic, and official confirmation. The hearing barely had time to cool down before the internet lit it back on fire. Reporters were uploading clips while they were still walking out of the chamber, thumbs flying, captions forming in real time. Almost every post followed the same brutal 3-beat story. He mocked her. She stayed calm. She demanded answers. That structure spread fast because it was clean, simple, and emotional. You didn't need to understand legal theory to understand power shifting on screen. Within minutes, short clips were bouncing from platform to platform, trimmed down to the exact moment where the room went quiet and her words landed. Then the breakdown videos took over. Legal analysts froze the frame right when Crockett slid the packet forward, circling the tabs and pausing on the motion like it was a turning point in a movie. "This is where it changes," one voice said over the paused image. "This is when it stops being abstract." Commentators jumped in from both sides. Some called it a political ambush, accusing her of staging the moment. Others fired back, saying it wasn't an attack at all. It was a demand for equal standards. That argument only fed the momentum. Every disagreement created another clip, another reaction, another layer of commentary that kept pushing the moment higher in feeds. And right in the middle of it all was Alito's image problem. Not panic, not meltdown, something quieter and more damaging. The clip made it look like he threw the first punch and couldn't finish the fight. The moment that kept looping wasn't the sharp words. It was the pause. The second where he didn't interrupt. The half-beat where the room stopped moving. On screen, that silence looked like control slipping away. Inside the room, the ending had been quiet but heavy. When Crockett closed her binder, the sound was small but sharp enough to carry. No slam, no celebration, just a clean, controlled motion that said the point had been made. She didn't smile. She didn't look around for approval. She simply gathered her papers and sat back. The room felt different after that. Quieter than before, but not empty. The silence had weight, the kind that sticks around after something important has already happened. By the next morning, the reaction had settled into something more focused. People weren't arguing about who talked louder. They were repeating the same takeaway in different words. She didn't win by yelling. She won by building a record. Law students shared the clip in group chats, breaking down her pacing and control like it was a case study. Lawyers reposted it with comments about discipline under pressure. Regular viewers kept saying the same thing in plain language. She stayed calm, she didn't fold, and she made him deal with the question. The line that kept spreading wasn't an insult. It wasn't flashy. It was the standard she dropped in the middle of the exchange. Answer on the record. That phrase became the headline, the caption, the hook. People used it as shorthand for the entire moment. It wasn't about embarrassing anyone. It was about forcing accountability into the open. Every time the clip replayed, viewers waited for that line like it was the turning point, the moment where the balance finally shifted. If this moment made you believe accountability still matters, don't let it stop here. Subscribe now. Hit the notification bell and stay with us for more real confrontations where power gets challenged and truth gets put on the record. Share this story with someone who needs to see what calm courage looks like. Because the next showdown is coming, and you won't want to miss it.